Hello, my name is Mary Morton, and today's presentation is on ventricular arrhythmias. The objective of today's presentation is to be able to recognize presence of arrhythmias clinically, be able to differentiate supraventricular arrhythmias from ventricular arrhythmias by ECG, recognize the importance of ischemic heart disease and electrolyte imbalance as a cause of ventricular arrhythmias, and to know when to refer to specialists for further cardiac testing and treatment, especially when associated with significant signs and symptoms. Finally, be knowledgeable of treatment modalities for ventricular arrhythmias, needs for devices, and VFRS. I have no conflict of interest as related to this presentation. Ventricular arrhythmias, as we know, are scary-looking white complex QRS complexes that stick out like a sore thumb on the ECG as shown over here. They're common. They can be benign asymptomatic PVCs, or it could be VT to VF, leading to sudden death in certain individuals. The prognosis and treatment varies with symptoms and underlying pathology. In a person that comes in with palpitation and has PVC with a normal heart, assurance, and less caffeinated beverages with no cigarettes and no alcohol is generally recommended. PVCs and VT with known history of myocardial infarction or coronary artery disease, when it happens, that's when we all worry. Ventricular arrhythmias or PVCs are early depolarization of the ventricles. They're common with and without structural heart disease. And the commonest cause of cardiac causes that we worry about the most. Number one, cardiac ischemia, acute and chronic ischemic heart disease, patients with cardiomyopathy, whether it's dilated or if it's a restrictive or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, patients with valvular heart disease, for example, aortic stenosis, mitral regurgitation, tricuspid regurgitation. Those are the ones that cause more ventricular arrhythmias. Of course, in patients with aortic regurgitation, when they're volume loaded, we're likely to see a lot of PVCs as well. The other chronic diseases, which are not cardiac, but they influence the heart. Those systemic disorders include thyroid disease, hypertension, and COPD, to name a few. Of course, there are other conditions that can also cause it, but these three are the common ones that you should be aware of and dealing with it as an outpatient, in the outpatient setting. The stimulants that can cause ventricular arrhythmias, caffeine is well known, followed by cocaine and alcohol use. Metabolic abnormalities can also lead to PVCs, most importantly, acidosis, hypoxemia, or electrolyte imbalance. Among the electrolyte imbalance, the thing that we worry about the most is hypokalemia and hypomagnesemia. They culprit with diuretics, and we also see it with hyperkalemia in a patient with renal dysfunction. Drugs that can cause ventricular arrhythmias include inotropes, especially digoxin, theophylline given to patients with COPD, antipsychotic drugs, and tricyclic antidepressant, which cause prolongation of the QT, certain antifungal antibiotic agents, which influence the QT interval, certain antiarrhythmics with proarrhythmic potential, for example, flecainide, dofetilide, sotalide, and quinidine, sotalol and quinidine, to name a few. How do you diagnose PVCs on EKG? Number one, as I mentioned, they stick out like a sore thumb on the EKG as shown over here. They're not preceded by a P wave, and sometimes you may see a P wave coming towards the end or in the downward slope of the QRS. Complex comes in earlier than expected, and the QRS complex is generally wide, greater than 120 milliseconds. It's not preceded by P wave and often has a full compensatory pause, examples of which you will see later. It is usually felt as an irregular pulse or a skip beat followed by a pause. The patient may say, my heart stopped for a second and then I felt a thump. The thump is usually the beat after, not before. Not the skip beat, but the beat after the PVC is the one that they're feeling it. This is a 12-lead EKG of a person with multiple PVCs, and they are all unifocal, looking the same. If you look at the rhythm strip at the bottom, it's showing that the PVCs are looking alike. They're coming in early, and they're followed by full compensatory pause. That means they're not resetting the sinus node. Here, the PVCs are happening every third beat, so we call it as a trigeminy. And here, they're happening every other beat, so we call this as a bigeminy. Bigeminy means two, every other beat, trigeminy, every third beat. And that's what we are seeing in here. Just sticking out like a sore thumb and not preceded by a P wave, no P wave, and a compensatory pause, native QRS complex, and then a PVC. So if you look at lead one, we can see a P wave, QRS complex, and a T wave, P wave, QRS complex, which came in a little early, and that's the T wave. P wave over here, QRS complex, T wave, and here there's no P wave and a QRS complex coming in early. So this one could have been classified as a fusion bead, but this is classified as a PVC. Fusion bead is PVC that falls onto a native QRS complex that is coming down. What are the diagnostic tests that you can do for a person that comes in with complaints of palpitation, or if you see PVCs on the EKG? We do 24-hour Holter monitor, 48-hour Holter monitor, or 72 hours Holter monitor. Holter monitors record every QRS complex in a person that's happening while they have the monitor on. You can have a 3-lead monitor, as in this case. They have 5 leads put onto the patient's chest, and it's recording 3 leads in the form of QRS complexes coming in different axes. So you can define the P wave, you can look at the ST segment, QT interval, etc. When the person has the Holter monitor on, they're not allowed to take a shower and they're not allowed to swim. So otherwise these leads will fall off and you cannot make any recording. The recording is digitized. The tape, when you take it out, you can put it into a reader. The reader spits out the full disclosure, or it can give you whatever kind of disclosure that you would like. It's up to you to select. In addition, you can have the computer read the Holter monitor for you. So that's automated mode. You can have learn mode, means that you select and tell the machine what kind of QRS complexes you want to label as PVCs or PACs, or you can do a complete manual mode where you label every QRS complex as yourself, or you do a full printout and then go ahead and look at the whole full printout of 24 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours, whichever way you like. When you're doing a 24-hour printout, each line is about 1 minute long, and each page gives you about 60 minutes of EKG over there. And, after reading a few, you can read in between the line, and the PVCs will be sticking out like a sore thumb, so they're easy to see. The other modalities that you can use are the event monitors. These are something that the patient carry with them. They can be attached onto the watch. It can be like a watch, and they can be recorded as necessary, or they can have the finger ones, the finger readers, and the monitor will read the EKG as the person puts on the monitor on. Or you can have the other kinds of monitor, which we do very often over here, which is the Zio patch. These monitors over here can also be transtelephonic. Once the patient puts a monitor on, the EKG can be transmitted to the provider or into the office, wherever they are hooked onto. This is what we call as a Zio patch. It records for, or an event monitor, which records for 2 weeks, 7 days, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on the way that you have programmed it and how much of capabilities that it has. It has a continuous loop which continuously record all the beats, but it stores only certain kinds of beats that you have pre-specified, heart rate less than 30 or 40, PVCs, PACs, pauses, whatever you want. It keeps it in the memory. And it can be wirelessly remotely transmitted onto the area where it can be live transmitted, or it can The patch can be sent back to the company for the full disclosure to be sent to you later. Of course, in this day and age, we also have the iPhone. And if you put your finger on the back of the camera and if you have the app, you can get the EKG over here. This is the finger pad, and this is the one with the camera in the back. With finger pad, you just put your two fingers and it gives you the EKG, but the pad itself costs about $199, and then you have the programmer, which costs additional money. We will discuss a few cases. Case one is that of a young gentleman, 23 years of age, who had presented after sick pull episode while having dinner with his face falling into the bowl of soup that he is having for dinner. Not a good feeling. He has a history of asthma and has frequent UTIs. And for the asthma, he has been using albuterol as needed and has completed a course of levofloxacin. He's otherwise healthy and attends a local college. He doesn't use alcohol. He doesn't smoke. He drinks about 2 cups of tea with milk and sugar every day. He does not take any additional stimulants like coffee, Pepsi, etc. His family history is unremarkable. He has no allergies. Cardiac exam in the physical exam as a whole is unremarkable. You hear a nice S1, nice S2, no murmurs, good carotid of stroke, no JVD, no pedal edema, PMI is not palpable, lungs are clear, and he looks good. He has a copy of blood test results that he had done recently, which shows his TSH was normal, 4.2, potassium 3.8, magnesium 1.9, which is slightly lower than normal, what you would anticipate for a normal individual. Upper limit of normal for us is 2.2. While he's being seen, he had a similar episode, and you were able to obtain an EKG. Shown here is his EKG. This is a 12 lead. This is a 3 lead EKG over here, showing lead 2, V1, and lead 3. And if you notice that he has got a PQRST, he has got a PACs over here, came in early, PQRST, PQRST, PQRST. And here you go, he has got an irregular rhythm. He's got a fast looking rhythm where the axis has suddenly changed. And the QRS complexes are wide, and they're sticking out like a sore thumb, and then it stops suddenly and then goes back into the normal rhythm. Important thing to notice is his QT interval is more than half the RR interval, indicating that he's got QT prolongation. And here he had the QT prolongation, and then he has this episodes of what we call as non-sensitive ventricular tachycardia. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 beats of PVCs in a row, occurring at a rate about 160, 170 beats per minute, and then stops suddenly, and then he goes back into normal rhythm. So in this case, what we saw was EKG with normal sinus rhythm with prolonged QT and episode of non-sustained ventricular tachycardia, and possible contributing factors here for VT as its cause of syncope, we think is albuterol and his antibiotics together. So the treatment is to try and take him off the antibiotics or switch over the antibiotics, or have him hold back the albuterol for a while he needs the antibiotics. On the other hand, we may come across patients that come to the emergency room complaining of feeling lightheaded and dizzy. Heart rate is 150, and the QRS complex, all of them look wide, irregular, ugly looking, with an axis which is pointing downward, and intermittently you see a P wave coming out, which is marching at its own wavelength, and the QRS complexes are coming faster than that. This is monomorphic VT, and it's generally seen with scar, coronary artery disease, dilated cardiomyopathy, arrhythmogenic ventricle, and bundle branch reentry. Shown here is another example of ventricular tachycardia. And again, the axis has changed. The QRS complexes are wide, and the AVR is upright. This is what we call as a ventricular flutter, where the QRS complexes are wide, and there is no isoelectric segment between the QRS complexes. The rate is about 170, 180, and there's no segment in between. On the other hand, in here, we can see PQRST coming in here, and then suddenly the patient goes into irregular rhythm, fast rhythm without P wave, and the rate is about 200. And this is polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Some people may call it VFib, some people will call it as ventricular flutter, but this is generally seen in patient that is ischemic and needs immediate attention. So these are 12-lead EKG of monomorphic ventricular tachycardia. This is a case of ventricular flutter, and this is a case of what we call as torsade, a twisting of the point around. So what is torsade? Torsade is a polymorphic ventricular tachycardia, and there's twisting of the point. The QRS complex will get wider and then become less in amplitude, and suddenly they will become wider and higher in amplitude again, as though twisting around the point. It can be seen in patients with congenital prolonged QT syndrome. When the QT is prolonged, it can be drug-induced with prolonged QT. When the QT is prolonged with class 1A, 1C antiarrhythmic drugs, drugs like sotalol, amiodarone, phenothiazine, lithium, methadone, chemotherapeutic agent, doxorubicin, guanosine, CYP3A pathway drugs, and HIV drugs like HARDM. Electrolyte imbalance are very important. Hypomagnesemia and hypokalemia that can cause you to have ventricular tachycardia and torsade. And of course, you can see it in patients with intrinsic heart disease as well as CNS disease. The treatment is either you give them IV magnesium sulfate, even with normal serum magnesium level, or you think about isoprel infusion, 210 microgram per minute for acute control. And some people will go for temporary overdrive pacing with a rate greater than 140 per minute. Beta blockers, propranolol and Inderal, are very useful for patients with congenital QT prolongation. And some places they have also used Dilantin in patients with prolonged QT to help shorten it. Sometimes we come across patients that have a fast heart rate. And here you can see that the heart rate is 300, 150, 130 beats per minute. The QRS complex, however, are looking narrow. And that's when we suddenly start thinking, is it really supraventricular or ventricular tachycardia? Here you can see the P waves marching out in here, indicating that this person has got atrial flutter with 2-to-1 conduction. And sometimes it can be difficult to identify. It may just look like supraventricular tachycardia. But if the QRS complexes are narrow, it's supraventricular. It could be atrial flutter, it could be SVT, AV, and RT, it could be sinus tachycardia, but not VT. VT sometimes can be confused with patients with atrial fibrillation with aberrancy. Here, you can see that the QRS complexes are wide, looks like VT, 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 but then suddenly when the patient slows down a little bit, you can see some irregularity indicating that it was AFib with aberrancy. So now moving on to case number 2. This is a case of a person with known ischemic heart disease who has walked into the emergency room complaining of rapid heartbeat. You're examining him and notice that his pulse rate is increased. You take his vital signs and note a blood pressure of 100/60. Pulse rate is about 150 beats per minute. And the QRS complexes are wide on him. AVR is upright instead of downward, and lead 1 and AVF are downward, indicating rightward axis on this person. He's talking, he's awake. But he feels the palpitation. The question comes, what would you do next with the patient? And that's where, a lot of people will have a lot of difference of opinion, but generally, if the person is talking, he's still got a pulse and is wide and awake, you're not going to think about cardioversion, but try to think about giving him some medication to help slow down the heart rate and bring up his blood pressure. So cardioversion is not the first line therapy. You would not want to give him adenosine. Some people will give them procainamide, but now there is a little shortage of procainamide, so we tend to go into the amiodarone. Verapamil is contraindicated in such cases. So in this case, cardioversion is not indicated as the patient is stable. Adenosine is only indicated in patients with narrow complex tachycardia to differentiate different kinds of SVT. That means somebody coming with supraventricular tachycardia, narrow QRS complex, like the first EKG that you saw where the patient's rate was 150 and had appeared to have two P waves to every QRS complex, but the QRS complex were narrow. And if you're not sure, you can give him adenosine and see if he's got this slows down or breaks the supraventricular tachycardia, or you see multiple P waves indicating that this guy's got atrial flutter. Wide complex tachycardia, as seen in this case, could have been WPW, SVT aberrancy, or VT, or VPIS rhythm, or it could be an artifact, especially when we come across patients in the ICU who are brushing the teeth, doing something different. Suddenly you might see the QRS complex getting wide and looking funny, but you would see small spike in other uh, leads that will show that it was narrow QRS complex and the rest is all artifact. Verapamil is contraindicated with bicomplex tachycardia. So the answer here in this particular case would have been procainamide. Procainamide or amiodarone would break down the VT, and shown here is the person's EKG with the narrow QRS complexes, normal looking PVCs after the VT was broken. So remember, wide complex tachycardia is VT unless proven otherwise in older patients and those with ischemic heart disease. They have AV dissociation as shown over here. Axis is northward, northwest with AVR being upright, and the QRS complexes are wide. If they have a right bundle branch morphology, it would be greater than 140 milliseconds. And if it has an underlying left bundle morphology, it may be as wide as 160 milliseconds. So what is VT and how do you define ventricular tachycardia? We call it sustained when it's greater than 30 seconds or less than 30 seconds associated with hemodynamic collapse. We call it non-sustained when it's greater than 3 beats. 3 beats is triplets, 4 beats is non-sustained ventricular tachycardia, but there's some difference of opinion. Some people will call even 3 beats as non-sustained ventricular tachycardia. Greater in those patients that have less than 30 seconds not associated with the hemodynamic collapse, they are considered as non-sustained. But if they have hemodynamic collapse, less than 30 seconds, it's considered as something significant or sustained VT. Repetitive monomorphic ventricular tachycardia is non-sustained ventricular tachycardia that looks the same and is repeating upon itself. Means that it looks the same. It doesn't matter if it comes after 1 minute, 10 minutes, or 30 minutes later. The QRS complexes in the ventricular tachycardia are looking to be of the same morphology. We call it VT storm when there are 3 episodes of ventricular tachycardia in 24 hours, requiring intervention to terminate. Accelerated idioventricular rhythm is ventricular tachycardia when the ventricular rate is less than 110 beats per minute. Polymorphic VT is when there's changing morphology beat to beat, as you would see in Torsades. Pleomorphic VT is more than one distinct morphology during the same episodes of ventricular tachycardia. It will appear to be wider and then narrower, less of an amplitude, and then again getting bigger. This is an example of a person with the idioventricular rhythm, and the lower one is an example of episodes of non-sustained ventricular tachycardia, which is looking just the same, doesn't matter when it's fast or slow. And here it's much faster rate. But if you notice that the paper speed has been slowed down, its QRS complexes are narrower. So is the P wave indicating that it's done at half the speed in order to get the whole episode of non-sustained ventricular tachycardia. This is an example of a person with what appeared to be ventricular tachycardia, but it's supraventricular tachycardia with aberrancy. So VT can occur from different region. Generally, we tend to look at RVOT and LVOT. If it's one AVL and V1 and AV are right-sided leads, precordial leads are the anterior leads. And based on that, we decide if it's going to have a right bundle morphology or a left bundle morphology. If in the lead one, if you see an RSR, means first R wave, and then a small S wave, and then again an R wave, then it generally is a right bundle morphology with a QRS complex less than 140 milliseconds. And if it looks downward, mostly negative, it's a left bundle morphology. So the right-sided leads, will give you more prominent R waves, and the left-sided VT will give you more of a left-sided morphology. This is showing the P waves, and here the P waves are coming out, and there's PVC with the capture. And that's a typical sign of ventricular tachycardia when you see an occasional PVCs, which is being captured by the sinus speed. In a normal heart, monomorphic VT can come from the RVOT or LVOT, perivenous tissue, papillary muscle, or fascicular VT. And you can also see with long QT syndrome, Brugada, and catecholamine-induced VT. This is an example of Brugada syndrome. And as you can see that the ST segment here is elevated. It looks like right bundle, but not really a true right bundle. And this is the hump that is looked out for when Brugada syndrome is suspected in an individual. Brugada syndrome is a type of channelopathy. It is autosomal dominant with male predominance. The risk of ventricular arrhythmia and sudden death, if present, then it is known as a syndrome. Brugada pattern is when there is EKG features, but there are no symptoms. So we come across patient that EKG that looks like Brugada, but the patient never had any symptoms. Tachycardia. So what to do when a person comes in with tachycardia? First and foremost, we have to check their pulse, color, mental status, and oxygenation, and attach the patient to cardiac monitor and look for presence or absence of chest pain. Then, of course, you do your assess airway, hypoventilation, look at the patient's pulse ox, look at the patient's blood pressure. If they're hypotensive, yes or no. If they're hypotensive, then they need fluid. Make sure that they have a good IV access and rule out drugs that may cause any kind of anaphylaxis reaction. Then look at the EKG. Are they narrow complex? If they're narrow complex tachycardia, if they are, then are they regular or irregular? And generally, they are helped by doing an adenosine, asking them to do a Valsalva maneuver. And sometimes, amiodarone may be useful in those individual beta blockers or calcium channel blockers, especially when they have normal left ventricular function. Point of care ultrasound is useful in those individuals to make sure that the LV function is normal. If they have a wide complex tachycardia, then the question becomes, do they have ventricular tachycardia or is it AFib with aberrant conduction? So if a person comes with a wide complex tachycardia, we have to find out if they are responsive or unresponsive. If they're unresponsive, then we have to do our CPR and take them through the ACLS protocol. If they're unstable, show sign of decreased end organ perfusion, we look at the rhythm. Organized rhythm needs a synchronized cardioversion if the patient is awake, PF, defibrillation, and if the person has got torsade, you give them magnesium. If a person has got organized rhythm, but you cannot feel a pulse, then you may have to do a unsynchronized cardioversion. In a person with stable but has wide complex tachycardia, you have time. You can try and see if the patient's got SVT. Does he have WPW with AFib? With RVR, do they have ventricular tachycardia? If they are stable, you can try out a number of drugs. If the QRS complexes are narrow, vagal maneuvers do not help, You can try adenosine, 6 milligram IV, followed by 12 milligram IV, 12 milligram IV. And that should be more than enough to break it if the patient's SVT is going to break. The thing to remember with adenosine is adenosine has to be given rapidly. Otherwise, it degenerates and it's of no use. It takes about 6 seconds to 12 seconds to work. And after 12 seconds, the effect of adenosine is gone. Beta blockers can be useful to slow down the heart rate and attempt to convert them into normal sinus rhythm. It can be given as an infusion, or you can give them IV boluses. Calcium channel blockers in the form of IV infusion are commonly given to slow down the ventricular rate and convert patients from rapid AFib and A-flutter into sinus rhythm. It's when the patient starts getting bradycardic and relatively hypotensive, that's when they tend to convert back into sinus rhythm. In a patient with WPW, AFib with RVR, you can use procainamide or imidrone. Procainamide is not available as readily as it did before, so most people are switching on to the imidrone. The treatment for ventricular tachycardia is imidrone. That's the first line treatment in a person with a stable ventricular tachycardia. So when a person comes in that has a ventricular tachycardia or has a rapid heart rate, you look at the responsiveness. How well does the patient respond? Is the patient awake? Is he talking to you? Can you take his blood pressure? What does the color look like? If he looks good, you can go ahead and start your IV, connect them to the monitor, get the blood pressure, get the patient hooked onto the automatic blood pressure cuff and get the EKG on the person. While you do that, it may be important to just consider activating the EMS. Code is important in a person when the person becomes unresponsive. You need to call for the code. Circulation in the form of being able to see a person's pulse, be able to feel it, and then finally we look for defibrillation. For VFib, V-flutter and pulseless ventricular tachycardia, the management is the same, follow BLS and ACLS guidelines. We have V-flutter and pulseless ventricular tachycardia, immediate and synchronized DC cardioversion using 200 to 400 joules. In biphasic, you may just want to use the 200 joules. CPR until defibrillation equipment is ready. Anesthesia is not required if the patient is in VF, V-flutter, and pulseless ventricular tachycardia. It's only when the patient's blood pressure is good, patient is awake and talking, that's when you need to get anesthesia. After conversion to sinus rhythm, need to continuous monitoring and initiate measures to prevent recurrence. VFib, V-flutter, and pulseless ventricular tachycardia has to be converted to sinus rhythm within 30 to 60 seconds in order to prevent any kind of significant acidosis. So for evaluation and management of ventricular arrhythmias in general, for PVCs, NSVT, sustained ventricular tachycardia, and polymorphic VT and VF is shown here. Initial evaluation for all of them requires history, physical examination, ECG, echo, TSH, electrolyte, and drug screen. For PVCs, you have time. You can do a lot of testing. If the person has no structural heart disease and no high-risk features, you can reassure them and monitor the rhythm. If the initial evaluation is abnormal and the PVC is greater than 10,000 in 24 hours, generally cardiac MRI is recommended. And the option in those patients with structural heart disease is beta blockers, sotalol, imidrone, and catheter ablation. For non-sustained ventricular tachycardia, again, you do your history, physical examination, ECG, echo, TSH, electrolytes, and drug screen. And VT suppression is guided by symptoms. Patients monitor of rhythm is important. If they have abnormal initial evaluation, we have to treat the structural heart disease and consider EP studies, cardiac MRI, and VT suppression based on patient symptoms. The treatment options again are beta blockers and amiodarone. Rarely we need to use sotalol and consider an ICD in those individuals. Patients with sustained ventricular tachycardia, you do a targeted history and physical exam, get an EKG, echo. If you have time, get and have results available, you look at the TSH results. Otherwise, electrolytes and drug screen is extremely important. VT suppression is important, and you must monitor the rhythm. Those that have abnormal initial evaluations, again, we have to rule out the structural heart disease, do a cardiac MRI, think about getting an ICD for anti-tachycardia pacing and VT suppression. The options for treatment again are ICD, beta blockers, amiodarone, sotalol, and some antiarrhythmics like mexiletine 1C drugs can be used. Polymorphic VT and VF again is similar. Initial evaluation requires history, physical examination, echocardiogram to look at the LV function, electrolytes, drug screen, and TSH. But most importantly, we need to rule out acute coronary syndrome. We have to look for reversible causes, and the treatment is again looking for causes that can be reversed in order to prevent ventricular arrhythmias. We have to treat their acute coronary syndrome, consider an ICD in individual with low ejection fraction, or if the VT is something that needs termination because of structural heart disease, inherited syndrome, and patients with cardiac arrhythmias that are not coming from the myocardium, but they're coming from the RVOT or LVOT, then we need to think about getting the cardiac MRI. Again, the treatment is ICD, beta blocker, antiarrhythmics, and ablation of the PVCs. So treatment of ventricular tachycardia, idiopathic VT, outflow VT, beta blockers, adenosine calcium channel blockers, ablation. Rarely we can use antiarrhythmic drugs, but not defibrillators. Scar-based ventricular tachycardia class 3 drugs are important. Amiodarone, sotalol, tofetilide, beta blocker, ICD ablation, and neuroaxial blocks. In patients with bundle branch reentry, ablation plus minus ICD is considered important. Polymorphic VT requires magnesium, pacing to shorten QT interval, avoidance of offending agent, isoprel, dopamine, and correct underlying cause. Indication for ICDs are many. For most important is the prevention of sudden death from VT-VF. It is used for secondary prevention in patients who have been resuscitated from VT or VF. And it is used for primary prevention in patients who have not had VT-VF but are sufficiently high risk. Those include patients with dilated cardiomyopathy, patients with ischemic cardiomyopathy. 80% indication for ICDs are for primary prevention. Only 20% are for secondary prevention. And these are based on a number of trials. Most importantly are the primary prevention studies for post-myocardial infarction. That includes the MEDIT trial, MEDIT-1, MEDIT-2, MUST trial, and Cabbage Patch trial. For non-ischemic cardiomyopathy and ischemic cardiomyopathy, SCUD-HAP trial has been one of the trial that is always mentioned in the literature. Other secondary prevention trials that have been talked about a lot are the AVIT trials, SIDS trial, and the CASH trial. And all of them have found that placing an ICD in these individuals does decrease mortality. So looking at devices and the ICDs, initially epicardial leads were being placed through open heart surgery, and sometimes a defibrillation patch is placed in some individual with the open heart surgery. Beforehand, the devices, the generators were big, so they could not be placed on the chest, so they had to be put in the abdominal cavity and hooked onto the subcutaneous tissue. Then it went into the subcutaneous space here. And finally, now the devices are getting smaller. And now we have devices being placed in the subclavicular region with the RV lead going down through the subclavian. Now we also have ICDs that can be placed externally with the generator being on the outside and the leads being on the inner side. ICDs are getting smaller over time. And this is an example of an ICD placed in the subclavicular region. Showing here is the generator with the loops of the coil of the leads underneath the generator to prevent the wires being pulled out. And these are the connectors for the leads, with the leads going down into the subclavian. And this is the coil for the shocking. So indications for ICD that's important that you need to know is 40 days status post-MI with an EF less than 30 to 40% patient with New York Heart Association class 2 or 3 on chronic optimal medical therapy and with life expectancy greater than 1 year. In patient with non-ischemic dilated cardiomyopathy with an EF of 30 to 35%, New York Heart Association class 2 to 3, and that are on chronic medical therapy with a life expectancy greater than 1 year. CRT in a patient, by CRT we mean cardiac resynchronization therapy in patients with another class 1 pacemaker indication who are New York Heart Association class 3 or 4 with an EF less than 35%, QRS duration greater than 120 milliseconds. Right. This is an example of an ICD shock for ventricular fibrillation. And if you can see the pacemaker, the ICD lead is following the patient. Patient goes into VT, recognizes the VT, and after it recognizes, it goes ahead and shocks the patient with 30 joules and puts the patient back into sinus rhythm. These are some of the references that you may want to look it over whenever you have time. I thank you for your attention.